Now, we've got someone coming on. I have no idea what they're going to ask. This is evidence of things unseen, I assume. I can't see your full name, but evidence of things unseen. How are you? What would you like to talk about?
Hi. So it's my birthday today.
Hmm. Happy birthday.
Thank you. And I had a question. I've been having a discussion with my son, and he is saying that he found some like atheist website, and he's been saying that faith is basically gullibility.
Hmm.
And then he pointed out that if you read Hebrews, it says evidence of things not seen. So, and then it like makes like a long list of people who like believed but didn't have evidence that they could see. And then at the end, it like came true, showing that their faith was like placed well, but they never really had like evidence that it would come true. They were just like
Hmm.
believing in it. So
Yeah. How did you
my
respond?
well, sorry, one sec. So I responded that we can have like faith that we're true because we're basing it on evidence, like
Hmm.
the Bible and the testimony.
Sorry, did you
And
say we can have faith that we are true?
yes, like we can know that the Bible is true because it tells us it's true, and that we know that it's God breathed. Um,
And how do we know that?
well, that's kind of why I wanted to ask you this question because I was like I kind of, and then my son was basically saying, well, the Bible is like basically a book written by people, and we acknowledge they're sinners and sinners can lie. So now, like, he's basically saying, like, the entire Bible could be made up.
Hmm. Yeah. How did
Um,
you respond to that? That's a great question.
well, I didn't want to dismiss him completely. So um, I was like, well, how'd you get there? Like, does that mean like every religious person is just like lying to themselves?
Hmm.
And because like, does he really want to say like 7 billion people are lying? So he's like, well, actually, yeah, that actually supports his view because he's saying it's like a natural thing that everyone is kind of conditioned to become a believer in their geographical region, with their popular religions,
Hmm.
and that the faith acts as a way to start the belief as like a confirmation bias. And then after a little bit of time, you also have like a sunk cost fallacy. So he's saying like these psychological reasons might explain why there's so many believers in the world. And it's
Wow.
not
How old
like
is your son?
he's 18, he's just starting his first year in college. So he's been like a believer, I thought, over the years,
Hmm.
but only in the past year he's been starting to text me all these things, and we've getting, Thanksgiving was a big nightmare. And I
Hmm.
probably said some things I regret. And in the meantime, I've had a lot of hard thoughts about this, and his uh his arguments are making me think a lot for the first time, and I don't really know how to,
Hmm.
like I've wanted to kind of use presuppositional logic and really kind of say that, like I have faith in the Bible. And he's just like basically saying like, no, that's just special pleading. It's like embarrassing stuff. And I'm like, well, it's not special pleading. Like we have like testimonies. Like, well, yeah, everyone has testimony. Like you
Hmm.
can't like make that argument when it applies to other people. And then I'm like, well, Jesus was the first, person to resurrect. And he's like, well, that was actually a common religious motif in many ancient Near East religions
So
where,
you guys have had a lot
oh,
of
huge,
discussions
huge
about this. Yeah.
discussions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Totally.
and
Well, let's talk real quick. I don't want to cut you off, but I want to get you're asking a bunch of questions here now at this point, which is fine because I asked you for what's going on in your discussions. Um, so in Hebrews, where in Hebrews does it say that faith is the evidence of things unseen? Do you know?
yes, it's in Hebrews 11.
Mhm.
Um, and
So can you pull that open?
Yeah, I have it here in front of me.
Okay.
So Hebrews 11.
Yeah.
Now
So
faith,
just, yeah, real quick. You're looking at verse 1, correct? Now, faith is the
yes,
reality of what is hoped for, the proof of what is not seen. And by this, our
yeah,
ancestors were approved. Okay,
you
good.
must,
So
yeah,
in
basically,
Hebrews, so faith is translated in the original language either, it can be, it's pistis, which
yeah,
can
the
be
Greek
either,
word, right?
exactly right. So it can be faith, it can be trust, it can be belief. Um, and it's related to the word for trustworthiness. Um, all of those Old Testament saints there in the Hebrews Hall of Faith were approved by God, not because of their great works, but because of their faith. These are people that knew God personally. These are people that had seen miracles. These are people who trusted in the promises of God. It doesn't
But
say that they
then
didn't
they
have
wouldn't
evidence.
have faith, right? They would have
Yeah.
evidence.
So I'm going to try to clear this up. Sometimes people say that faith is totally disjointed or separated from evidence. The point is not that they didn't have um, evidence like for the existence of God or something like that. All people, according to scripture, all people know God. This is not a text about atheism versus theism or something like that. This is looking back at the Old Testament, and it's describing the lives of these what we would consider to be heroes of the faith, and how they trusted in God's coming deliverance based on his providence, based on his promises, based on what they'd already seen him do, but they never met Jesus. They never saw the deliverer in the flesh. They never, so like Abraham is the quintessential example of this. You're familiar with the story of Abraham, right?
Right.
Right. So Abraham spoke directly to God in the flesh. Do you believe that?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
but I
So Abraham,
wouldn't say that he would had faith in God. He, like he could have taken a video essentially of him talking to God.
well,
And
Abraham,
like if we had gone back in time and basically like recorded that moment in time, like we
so
would
this is
see
where I
him
have to,
talking to God, right?
yeah, and this is where I have to push back on what you just said. Abraham did have faith in God. Faith in God, the faith in God that Abraham had was God made a promise to him, and Abraham believed it. And that promise, believed, that faith was credited to Abraham as righteousness. And Paul goes into a long discourse on this in the book of Romans. I encourage you to, I would just read through Romans all the way. It's a great complement to the book of
I feel
Hebrews.
like I could head off my son's like idea of
Real quick. I promise I'm going somewhere with this.
okay.
Um, But the faith that God approves of is the faith that is manifested out in works, meaning you live your life in accordance with that faith, but you believe in God's promises. That's what Hebrews 11, the great hall of faith, is getting at. These are people who were approved by God because their lives exemplified the faith that they had. So, whereas Romans 1 says that all men know God because God's eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being revealed in the things that He has made, you have one of two responses to that knowledge. You can suppress the truth in unrighteousness, um, and you can say, uh, whatever. Like I need different evidence than what God has provided, or whatever. Or you can submit yourself to the God who is there. You can believe His promises. Ultimately, that will lead to you and your son trusting in Jesus Christ, and that's really what Hebrews 11 is getting at. It's not faith is some sort of magical conjuring up of belief in spite of the evidence. All throughout Scripture, God gives certain proofs, and the greatest proof that God ever gave was raising Jesus from the dead. So, when you alluded to Jesus rising from the dead, your son made the zeitgeist comparison, where oh, that's just one of many dying and rising gods.
Osiris and yeah,
Yeah, I want to say this very respectfully. That is an incredibly
Romulus.
outdated position. Um, do an actual comparison to the dying and rising gods of ancient Egypt, for example, and they bear little resemblance to Jesus Christ. Although the point can be made that the pagan echoes in history of dying and rising gods, in a sense, signifies man's desire to be able to conquer death. There's even a guy right now, Brian Johnson, who's a tech bro.
Oh yeah,
That's
I
what they
know
call him.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's trying to conquer death, and he's talking all the time about this would be our greatest victory, to conquer death. So what you and I understand is that Jesus Christ has conquered death. He's the firstborn from the dead. And so,
Yeah, but he's not like living on Earth today, like Brian wants to do, right?
no, but Jesus is alive. He's in heaven, but he is physically
Right,
alive.
but we can't put him in front of Brian and be like we basically have to tell people they need faith to believe that Jesus is still alive. Because like
They need to have
we
faith. They
can't
need to
like
have faith
show a
in Jesus.
photo
They
of
need to
him,
have
right?
faith in Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope this is somewhat helpful. I think that people sometimes have a misconception of what faith is. They think it's belief in the absence of evidence or contrary
Well,
to evidence.
y-
As you said, though, you mentioned presuppositionalism. I assume that you know that that's the kind of apologetics we do here at the Think Institute. Um,
yeah, I know.
I would encourage you. We do have some videos about why evidence itself requires God. The idea of evidence, and you should tell your son this. The idea of evidence, which requires logical inference, the laws of logic, mathematics, even the reality of the physical world and external reality, uniformity in nature. These are all principles that make perfect sense within the Christian worldview, but they make zero sense if God is not really there. And so you believe that, correct?
Right, but my son has gotten into these issues before,
Mm,
and he basically says that although we say all men know God,
mhm.
he's really saying like, well, yeah, like we're an evolved species that have these brain flaws or something,
Yeah,
and these like so-called cognitive biases. And he's like, well, like he asked me how do I explain why Christianity is true and there's like a billion believers that believe that and know it and are going to heaven. But then there's like 6 billion non-believers, but
yeah,
believers in other gods. And he's like, well, are they all making it up and believing like a hallucination, or are
yeah.
they just like local cults or something? But like,
Well, again, that's
why
so I
are,
don't want to cut you off,
or
but
are they
that's
like
Romans 1.
demons or something? So
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
Romans 1. That's Romans 1. We sometimes use religion to keep God at arm's length, and atheism is the same thing. There's one true religion, there's one true worldview, and there are any number of false worldviews. If God is the necessary precondition for all rationality and evidence and all intelligent inquiry, science, etc., then
yeah,
any approach that denies God, the specific God of the Bible, is going to be false. It's going to be self-contradictory. And so atheism is
my son
another
laughed at
one
me when I
of
used
those
that.
false religions. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel. Here's a video that you should watch next. And if you really want to take your learning further, you need to know about the Hammer and Anvil Society, our premier discipleship community for Christian men. Learn more at thethink.institute/society. Until next time, I hope it made you think.